This is Fly, the coolest mini drone ever. That one's called B-Boy, the bigger brother of Fly and my new best friend when I travel. And this is me, Kate, just Kate. And the three of us are heading to Dagestan to take some video over the beautiful mountains there. Leaving the melancholy rain and wind of the Saint-Petersburg autumn behind, we arrived to a paradise on Earth. The Russian Federation is really lucky to have such a treasure. Makhachkala greets us with its splendid weather and mild 15 degrees Celsius temperature. Yeah, I probably overdid it with the winter coat, but it's my first time in the mountains. Better safe than sorry, right? Anyhow, my drones are going to catch some really magnificent views and panoramas. But let's take it one step at a time. Dagestan literally translates to country of mountains, which is pretty accurate considering the incredible mountains surrounding remain a large tourist attraction. There are 5 climate zones here in Dagestan, because of the huge differences in altitudes and the long coast along the Caspian Sea. It is one of the few Muslim regions in Russia, which affects the customs and the culture of the local people, and of course the architecture of the region. I nearly had to cancel this trip because of the countrywide lockdown, which even reached such a remote place as Dagestan. So I had to change my plans for the trip literally a day before departure. There are 3 ways to travel around Dagestan. Join a group tour, which means a comfortable and no-hassle journey. Find local guides who will take you on a round-the-clock trip to all of the famous tourist places, or rent a car and have an enjoyable drive through the serpentine mountains along the magnificent road. I'm not joking, the roads here are much better than in my city in central Russia. But for the not-so-skillful drivers, it can be a challenge because of the endless mountain labyrinths and cows. Yes, you heard right. There are good many of them on the local roads. So many that I just got bored with filming this natural wonder. Everyone dissuaded me from going. My mom, dad, grandmom and friends I shared my plans with. But when they understood I was going alone, the home saw a great scandal. How could you go to them? All alone? A young girl? To Dagestan? All alone? You're completely mad, my mom told me. But I had made up my mind to go, and go I would. And so there came my first morning in Dagestan. I was very lucky with the weather. The sun was shining bright almost every day, with no single cloud in the sky. First thing I decided to go to Gamsutl, an abandoned ghost village 1400 meters above the sea level. This village had never been seized during the Caucasian War, because, I can't help but quote the local guy, who would go up there? And indeed, going there is not a cakewalk.
Огоняем
конечно, классные. Но забираться на эту гору довольно-таки тяжело. А Гамсутль где-то там. But my efforts were rewarded with the surrounding nature and unbelievable mountain views. This applies to the entire road to the abandoned owl. The thing is that the Dagestan mountains are very different. In one day I saw deserted and torrid slopes covered with snow, mountains with dense green forests, and mountains covered with vegetation with yellowed and even fallen leaves. I felt like stopping every 5 minutes because every turn commanded a unique view begging to be photographed. The mountain ranges looked especially incredible as contrasted with the water. So the huge water reservoir was my first big stop on my way to Gamsutl. Just look at this beauty. There are no words for that. Yes, on this trip I was often at a loss for breathtaking scenery, and Salta Gorge was just another one on those places. The only underground waterfall in Dagestan is located here. There are many hollows in the gorge, being a height for mountain goats. This time I wasn't too lucky, and I saw not a single goat, unfortunately. Finally, after some hours of travel, Gamsutl hove in sight. There are about 40 abandoned villages throughout Dagestan, but it is Gamsutl that is the most famous one. Perhaps because of its good location, or perhaps because of its antiquity. Its last inhabitant died in 2015, and the settlement was founded in 1329. The funny thing was that the last two inhabitants of the owl didn't talk to each other for some reason. It's unbelievable that they didn't want to communicate at all. And this is a mystery which will remain undivulged. Gamsutl, of course, makes an unusual impression. Walking near all of these ancient and half-ruined buildings makes you feel like being on another planet. However, the huge number of tourists, even in late autumn, dispels the ghostliness and abandonment of the village to some extent. Still, I was lucky enough to be able to walk alone through the narrow streets with incredible scenery. I wish one day I had the same views from my windows. On the same day, I managed to reach Gunib, a village famous for its winding labyrinthine roads and wholesome climate with 300 sunny days a year. Here you may see the remains of a Russian fortress dating back to the Caucasian War. During the war, Imam Shamil, the leader of the Caucasian mountaineers, with a small squad of 400 people, hid here from the Tsarist troops totaling 15,000 soldiers. Because of its location, the owl could be approached only in two places, through the gates formerly held by Shamil's army, giving no chance for the enemy to get in. The invaders had to resort to subterfuge. Some men set out to test their climbing skills. They climbed the opposite side of the mountain to the fortress wall and attacked Shamil in the rear. They succeed to seize the impregnable Gunib only by stratagem. Currently, many sanatoriums, guest houses and private recreation cottages are located here. it is all about the uncommonly clean mountain air, which is extremely useful for people with lung diseases. Thus, a tiny village in a remote part of Dagestan hosts people from all over Russia. I reached Gunib only in the evening and managed to hear the sunset at dawn, the evening call of prayer. The first day of my journey ended on that happy note, and tired but incredibly inspired, I went back to Makhachkala. The next day promised less events but more impressions. I was going to visit the Sulak Canyon, probably the main attraction of Dagestan. Many people compare it to the Grand Canyon in the US and even claim that ours, Russian, is much better and more impressive. Well, the time has come. Let's check it out. On my way to the canyon, I looked in the local micro-desert. Yes, you heard right. This is where Europe's largest Barhan Sarakum is located. It is part of the Dagestan Nature Reserve, and drones are unfortunately prohibited from flying over. So I left B-Boy in the car and went uphill, which I did in Dagestan every day. And to be honest, it was totally unsurprising. Ну, эта гора выглядит не такой большой, как предыдущая, на которую я забиралась. Но тут уже дрона запускать нельзя, поэтому хочешь не хочешь, а придется дойти. The appearance of these sand dunes in such an uncharacteristic place is steeped in speculations. But neither theory has 100% proof. Some people are sure that the dune consists of sand brought here by rather strong mountain winds, in which case the Burhan would eventually move across the plain. Sarakum is motionless and doesn't even think of drifting out. Some people think the reason is the glacier, which absorbed all the sand and then melted to a sand dune. I favor two legends I heard from the locals. One of them says that many centuries ago a giant went through. He decided to shake sand out of his boots and accidentally created one of the most famous sights of Dagestan. Another legend tells us about a princess in trouble. The girl might have drowned in the lake. Two young men drove in, who decided to fill the lake with sand. One of them was more quickly with it and saved the princess, while the other made the last throw to disappear from their lives. Mountain eagles, huge birds with over 2 meters wingspread, often hover over the Burhan. I think that the drones were banned because the birds would drop upon the quadricopters and suffer from their blades, not to mention the fact that such attacks never ended well for the drones. Классно тут. Спускаться, конечно, гораздо легче, чем подниматься. At the Burhan, there is still an old ruined train station and a railroad leading to Buynaksk, the former capital of Dagestan. At this point, Makhachkala has been the capital for 100 years, and the railroad has long been abandoned. The next stop on the way to the canyon was Glavryba, a trout farm on the Sulak River with many family guest houses. Here are several restaurants serving newly caught fish. For a small fee, you can also go fishing, take a ride on the local steam train or the Ferris wheel. All in all, fish lovers have stuff to do, and I finally head on to the canyon lookout. unfortunately, this place was the biggest disappointment on the trip for me personally. Despite the absolutely cloudless weather and the shining sun, the entire canyon was misty. There was virtually no view of the water itself from the top, and the panorama was less than thrilling because of unmet expectations. For an extra bundle of money, I could go down to the water and take a half-hour boat ride, but nothing matched the view of the canyon from above, so I gave up on the 2-hour descent. And that's where B-Boy came to my rescue. However, I could only enjoy the beauty during the video editing at home, because the flight was too dangerous and nerve-wracking. I decided to lower my drone 600 meters down to fly through the haze and capture incredible canyon footage. The major threat was unexpected. B-Boy was attacked by a flock of 4 eagles. As he flew, I saw the birds around hitting the drone with their wings. Luckily, the vermin left him alone for some reason. That's why I have the incredible bird's eye footage of the Sulak Canyon for you. Yeah, it was definitely worth it. There are no words to describe these impressive views. After such adventures, I decided to have lunch at a local restaurant and try the chudu, Dagestan's favorite street food. While in St. Petersburg we have shawarma points on every street, here you see signs with salted chudu, a kind of very thin pie. A filling is put between 2 flatbreads, and the whole thing is baked in an oven. I can't say that I liked this dish madly, but we'll probably talk about the food later. Now let's talk about Derbent, the oldest town in Russia, which is listed by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. Derbent was considered to be 5,000 years old. Recently, they even issued a corresponding souvenir coin, but for some reason this information was changed, and now all the information signs indicate 2,000 years, making locals feel incredible irritation and upset. Derbent is just another fortress. Most of the town was surrounded by the impregnable walls, with the wealthier people living inside, and the poorer ones having to stay outside the walls. Of course, I immediately went to the Narinkala fortress, the most important and interesting site of the town. From the main gate viewpoint, you can see practically all of Derbent. The ancient part of the town is well preserved. All the streets between the houses are paved a kind of a labyrinth, making it impossible to travel without a navigator. Whereas many buildings and roads undergo a major reconstruction, even a navigator will be a poor assistant. The good thing is that the directions may be inquired with any local resident or cab driver. They will never deny assistance. To my layman's eye, the fortress itself doesn't look completely impregnable, despite the mountain cliffs on the 3 sides. In fact, the fortress was seized in battles several times. The Khan's baths are the best preserved premises inside, although they might be accessed by any tourist, but no one wanted it when I was there. Nevertheless, The area near the fortress was quite impressive, and I even managed to get lost in among the numerous stairs. The views from the walls were quite Instagrammable, so I felt the temptation and climbed up for a cool photo. 30 meters away, I found a sign prohibiting wall walking. Oops. After seeing the fortress, I decided to go to ancient Derbent, and here I found a local piece of Hollywood, a huge name of the city on the hill. The local Muslim cemeteries surprised me greatly. Apparently, they have no special place. The Derbent cemetery is located right under a huge inscription, 5 minutes walk from the fortress, the main attraction of the town. Often cemeteries are located on the mountain slopes. Wherever you go, you can easily run against the crooked slabs sticking straight out of the rock. There is something terrible about it. Then I went for adventure. There was no other word for it. In a couple of hours, I visited all the local religion's buildings, with the Armenian church being the first one. Its exterior and interior are rather simple. At the moment, it is a museum with a paid admission. However, once inside, you realize that there is not much to see and do here. Thereafter, I visited the synagogue, which was built here only 10 years ago. Its exterior is ordinary and unremarkable, but the interior keeps a lot of interesting things within. Luckily, no one was inside, and I was able to take shots over the interior without any problems.
Я в действующей синагоге в Дагестане, в Дербенте.
I doubted whether it was free to visit and escaped after a few minutes. My last stop was at the very first Juma mosque in Russia. It is located in the center of the old town, in maze of streets. However, according to the people of Derbent, every street will lead you to the mosque anyhow. It was built in 734 and has undergone many renovations over the years. Nevertheless, it preserved the ancient form. Everything looked impressive. Legend has it that during the construction, a vessel with gold coins was buried under the floor to take care of the restoration in case of destruction. Each of the 40 columns has an inscription saying that there is no treasure underneath, offering to look under the next one. The last column declared that it has no gold either, and it has no idea where to look for. It's kind of funny that someone decided to play a joke on such a sacred building. Afterwards, I went to the biggest central market of Derbent. There is none of that in St. Petersburg, and I really wanted to film the atmosphere, but I was afraid the locals wouldn't like it too much. I was completely wrong. The saleswomen were only glad that I displayed their goods and encouraged me to film the market beauty.
Пускай видео снимаю. Какой красивый веники. И здесь тоже видео. Красивые места есть.
Да.
Buradadır. Девочка торгует. Geldi gönderdi. Sonra otel yemile falan kaldı. Bir daha bir şey.
When I decided to buy some sweets, I was scammed on 300 rubles. А что это? А это? But I wasn't too disappointed. All the same, leaving the market with goods, money, and uncheated like the last citizen of capital of Russia requires, in my opinion, special fortitude. By the way, the local sweets were divine, so it was worth doing. After stopping and walking along the incredible Derbent embankment, it really surprised me. Ornamental flower beds, romantic heart-shaped arches, and pavilions with a magnificent view of the sea created the atmosphere of a resort beach even in late autumn. It was time to head for one of the most interesting sites in Dagestan. I mean the Caspian monster, an airplane, or in science terms a chronoplan called Luny, lying on the Caspian shore. This plane was intended to hit warships and perform reconnaissance, as it could fly at an altitude for only 2 or 3 meters over the sea at a speed of more than 500 kilometers per hour. In fact, Luny never participated in battles. This marvel of engineering required many tests and improvements, and when the prototype was finally finished, the project was abruptly shut down. From the time it was built in the 1990s, Luny was at a military facility, which kept it safe from marauders. It was decided to move it to the shore to attract tourists, and it was a challenging operation. Several ships of the Caspian flotilla were towing the plane, and it could be pulled ashore only with inflatable trampolines and tractors with 300-meter ropes. On good days, the plane could be pulled ashore by 5 or 10 centimeters. Now a concrete pedestal is developed. A construction plan for a park is drafted to make Luny a true tourist attractor. Its inner space is perfectly preserved, and sometimes tourists may get inside. But when I was there, all the doors were tightly closed, and the Caspian monster might be admired from the shore, or from the height, if you had a drone. On the way back, I came across a rather large herd of sheep in an empty field, and I couldn't miss the opportunity to let B-Boy pursue them for a while. was probably going to get it good by animal advocates for this, but I hadn't laughed so hard in a long time. Just look at frightened lambs flocking together with imminence. Of course, it was the noise of the propellers that scared them the most. The rear sheep, who could hear my drone better, pushed the ones in front of them, and soon the whole herd was running away. I hope they didn't think it was a slaughter day. Leaving the shaggy lambs alone, I flew off to pester the cows. Some horror trailer music would fit perfect here. In fact, the farther you get from the cities, the more animals you encounter on the roads. When I asked if I still had time to film the animals, my driver replied that sheep and cows are the Dagestan's identity. Indeed, I was lucky not to be here during the cattle drive. Twice a year, the owners of many animals drive them from the mountains to the plains and back again. It's all because of the temperature difference. In spring it gets warmer and the grass begins to sprout, while the tops of the mountains are still covered with snow heavily. When the animals have nothing to eat, they have to move down, but there are often no special trails for that. As a result, a herd of thousands of sheep or cows walk peacefully along a highway, while drivers have to literally push the leisurely animals with their bumpers. Meanwhile, before sunset, I wanted to get to the Samursky forest, the Russia's only liana forest 40 kilometers from Derbent. Frankly speaking, when I heard about this wonder of nature, I expected to see almost a thick vine jungle, similar to the one where the cartoon Tarzan lived. In reality, the jungle was less thick, but interesting. Some of the trees were completely covered with rose-like vines, which had quite strong thorny branches. Some trees were indeed completely covered by thick lianas, but most of the trees were ordinary and unremarkable. Soon it turned completely dark, and as I walked back to the car, I heard wolves or jackals howling. But I wasn't really eager to check to see who was there. To be honest, I felt quite uncomfortable right away. At first, I didn't even understand what was going on. I thought there were a few women screaming somewhere, and only when I realized there was not a single house around for several kilometers, I got an idea of what was going on. I jumped into the car and rushed home. I intended to spend the whole next day in Makhachkala, the capital of Dagestan. The only thing is, Makhachkala lacks special attractions. The internet shows that 9 places out of 10 are the monuments, plus the railway station. Nevertheless, walking around the city and smelling the local culture was quite interesting. To be honest, I was quite nervous before this trip. After all, the stereotypes about the locals are not really good, and they made me get worried about my safety. Especially after the household kicked up noise stating that they would steal me there and take away, or you got the idea. When I got off the plane, I felt like being on a train stop, so tiny the Makhachkala airport was. But when I first stepped onto the local soil, I heard a crowd of men yelling at me at the top of their throat. The cab drivers. I was taken aback for a few minutes, and then stepping back, I decided to film the incredibly warm welcome. Thinking like, where the hell had I got to? I reached my hotel and saw a local girl at the front desk. I wanted to know what to expect from the locals, so I asked how they behaved towards tourists, especially single female tourists.
Ну, я как минимум дошла. И даже без происшествий.
To which I was told that the attitude was just fine, and all the stereotypes bore no relation to reality.
Не очень смелая еще. Но, в принципе, можно сорвать, и никто против не будет здесь. Удивительно, конечно.
Looking ahead with great joy, I want to report that's the truth, pure and simple. I have never met people of such character anywhere else so far. The people of Dagestan are very kind, hospitable, and warm-hearted. You feel that they communicate with you not to squeeze money, but to tell more about the local traditions, culture, and religion. A couple of times I was invited by people I had known for less than a day. The driver, who had been driving me around Dagestan for 2 days in a row, invited me over, so that I could film the ordinary people's house in Makhachkala. I thought I'd take a few shots and then head back to the hotel, but no such luck. He introduced me to his family and children. They fed me and gave me a pile of gifts I hardly stuffed into my little backpack. In general, the Dagestan sincerity and hospitality can be a surprise. My hotel was in the center of the city, although I found no particular difference between it and the outskirts. The whole Makhachkala has only one big central street with restaurants, a cinema, and expensive boutiques. And even with a local Apple store and a fairly modern shopping mall. In Dagestan, it's next to impossible to find familiar signs and names. Mostly all small and medium-sized businesses are private outlets, not belonging to big franchises. Nevertheless, I found KFC, which, as locals said, had appeared as many as 6 in the city in the last year. There is not a single McDonald's in the Republic, which is noteworthy. The impression of the city is nuanced, because even one street may accommodate 2 castle houses, but around the corner you come across very old, rundown and unattended high-rise buildings. In short, the buildings are not common in architectural style. Most of them are private 2-story freestyle houses. Right in the city, many people have their own backyard gardens, where they grow everything they can think of. Persimmons, pomegranates, peaches, pears, apricots, and even nuts. The first thing I did, of course, was going to the beach, since I lived on the front coastline. A piece of the sea was even visible from my window.
Да, вид, конечно, не совсем на море, но как минимум его видно.
But getting there required a 15 minutes walk through the station building. I imagine how in the summer I go through the security in my swimsuit and put a bag with a water pistol and a tube for customs clearance. And the most interesting thing is that once I got to this city beach, I bumped into this. Swimming was forbidden there. Well, what did you want? Just a beach on the seashore. Who would like to swim here? Okay. The beach was pretty anyway. For the most part it is sandy, but as close as the edge a lot of very nice seashells might be found. The other end, however, merged into huge rocks, and the sight of the waves crashing against these miniature rocks was truly mesmerizing. 100 years ago, the city's name was Petrovsk Port, and indeed, even now you can find many ships here, which may be spied on only from above. No tourist entrance to the port was available. Thereafter, I went to the main city square to see the government building. It is quite modest, but still stands out from the rest of the city. And on weekends, the square turns into a place for walks and active children's games. The proud Lenin monument keeps the order, so there are fewer policemen here as at the station. My next destination was the viewpoint commanding a gorgeous view of Makhachkala, but I didn't feel like taking a taxi. I decided to walk through the small streets and experience the city life thoughtfully and in close-up, and not from the car whizzing by. Along the way, I happened to stumble upon the main attraction of the city, the snow-white main mosque of Makhachkala. This building is relatively new. It was constructed only in 1997, so it really looks impressive. As I looked around the mosque from all sides, a woman who worked there came up to me. I settled down for disputes about my drone circling over the shrine, but she greeted me very politely and invited me inside. The mosque has two entrances, one for women and one for men. The reason for this division wasn't clear to me, because in the end everyone goes into one large inner room. The two entrances are located at building flanks with separate booths for men and women's pre-prayer ablutions. Muslims pray 5 times a day, necessarily facing Mecca, where the main forbidden mosque is located. In the mosque, people are required to be shoeless. Women are required to have their hair scarfed and wear a long skirt. No jeans are allowed. As usual, we see luxurious carpets and lots of inscriptions in Arabic inside, which I was strictly forbidden to touch. To be honest, I had no such desire at all. The interior design is very modest. The only thing that attracts attention is a huge chandelier weighing a ton. It even has a special mechanism to lower it down for cleaning. After finding my way out of the mosque with difficulty, luckily a girl I turned to helped me out. I proceeded with ascending to the viewpoint. Those few kilometers made me recall practically all of the bad words I knew. I might conclude that the viewpoint was at a considerable height, and I could easily get to the top by cab, and from there walk down to the city, singing and effortlessly. Nevertheless, when I was up, I saw a great view of the whole Makhachkala. not far away, I found another huge cemetery, which I decided to take a look at. Oh, it really did look creepy. Being hungry after such an ascent, I decided to have a lunch. Since I was in Makhachkala, the local cuisine would be of interest. As I told earlier, chudu didn't impress me at all, although I ate it 3 times. Unfortunately, when I decided to take a meal, I saw not a single sign saying canteen or cafe. So I had no alternative to the modest cafe across from the train station near where I lived. The hostess suggested me to taste hinkal, a piece of meat with a side dish of thinly rolled boiled dough served with broth or tomato sauce, and kurze, Dagestan version of our Russian dumplings, or pelmeni. Great, I thought, and after a few minutes the dish was served. The dumplings were excellent, but I didn't fully understand what was up with hinkal. The cut pieces of dough resembled, by look at taste, scraps of dumplings, especially when you dip them in broth. On the other hand, if you're hungry, it's quite edible and very hearty. At all events, this was the end of my work as a restaurant critic, because I was anxious about my last day in Dagestan, which I decided to spend in Kubachi, a mountain village of master jewelers. In the morning, the weather in Makhachkala finally and irrevocably gone bad, so I was worried about the day's filming. Rain was far from the best environment for video recording. However, the closer the village, the sunnier it was. Statistically, these regions see the sun 300 days in the year. Although people in Kubachi don't feel happy about that. The village is situated in the mountains, at an altitude of 1,750 meters above the sea level, and it is constantly enveloped in fog. On the way, I stopped at Kalakareish, another abandoned village, and I like it even better than Gamsutel. Maybe because the ascent wasn't so long and hard. Just kidding. It is the matter of complete absence of tourists, which creates that atmosphere of true abandonment. Kalakareish has been abandoned for a long time, with most of the houses looking like piles of the stones and strange ruins. No roofs, no windows, no doors. But the ancient mosque and the tomb have withstood the ravages of time. Or maybe the mosque was renovated some time ago, I don't know exactly. It was still possible to go inside, so I did it. As usual, I saw many carpets and nothing else of note. After closing the mosque's door, I headed on to Kubachi, the silver village of Dagestan. The road was quite bad. I spent about an hour for the final 20 kilometers distance drive. But the sun-soaked mountains took my breath away. I was so lucky that the fog over the village melted away the day before I arrived. The locals told me that before that day it was misty 3 weeks a row. When the fog covers the owl, it's almost impossible to see anything. Only a few houses peek out at the very top of the mountain. Nevertheless, the most interesting thing was to come. A small museum of a local, which I had come here for. It has only one room, but in spite of that, it is really worth seeing. The Kubachins have many traditions being kept and passed down through generations, and the museum in every home is just one of them. They keep the most cherished items inherited from their ancestors. Various dishes, decorated weapons with local armor and women's clothes, shawls and dresses in which Kubachi women get married and attend the weddings of their friends and relatives. This clothing can cost 2, 3 or even 500,000 rubles. But Kubachins do not even think of selling their heritage. It is their culture which they care deeply. Kubachins even prefer wives from their native village, and due to considerable populations of 50,000 people, intermarriages are not a problem here. After seeing a museum and having lunch with the village's main guide, I ran up to the only watchtower and the highest point in the village. The view was magnificent, and the thing I remembered the most was the fog approaching the village again. It was moving slowly, but in half an hour the distant mountains were completely covered with the mist. After waiting for the sun deepen below the horizon, I realized that it was time to go back. First to my hotel in Makhachkala, and then to my place in St. Petersburg. During these few days I saw the mountains for the first time in my life, seized the opportunity to walk to some tops, breathe the purest highland and sea air, visit abandoned owls, pursue lambs, taste Dagestan cuisine, learn many local customs, and of course meet some wonderful people. Was it worth it? Definitely was. And if you want to experience something like this, Dagestan will welcome you and show its beauty. Believe me, you will be in for a treat. Thanks for watching, and bye bye.